our goal is to grow strong in relationship to all of those emotions and triggers of life. And that's what strength is. Okay, so you can't stay in the seed house forever. You are going to need to get out there and let life knock you around a bit in order for you to grow. Hey, I'm David. I'm a sniper turned meditator, also the founder and director of Kailash Ashram, a traditional meditation and yoga retreat here in the Outback in Australia. This video is taken from our weekly discourse series where we share live to our community and then sit for a beautiful meditation. Oh, and bonus karma points if you smash that lovingly press that subscribe button. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Para Brahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So in the spirit of really unpacking or providing value, actually, providing a little bit of guidance for those people who have come straight off the retreat, as well as extrapolating and understanding that for the rest of us. Tonight's theme, we're really looking at the different phases of the journey on this spiritual path. Rajni and I are in a really beautiful position where we witness a large number of people at various stages of their journey with differing spiritual practices. Obviously, we're heavily biased towards believing in the awesomeness of the Himalayan meditation and the Hatha Yoga, the message of the soul that we share with people. But more broadly speaking, our position inside of the ashram and the fact that we've seen people over the years coming and going. We know people in the shamanic community as well. We see a good deal of different people go through different processes of awakening. And the first phase, that they really that we see that is maybe worth pointing out is the descent. Now, this is normally a journey of death by 1,000 cuts. It might be that one or two key traumatic things have happened, but normally there's an erosion or a slow descent into a place of being ill at ease. And from this place, a large number of people just find a purgatory or a homeostasis in this misery and never really crack out of it. When it comes to self-realization, Swamiji really shares that it's best to think of these things as really like a seed, and the seed of self-knowledge is something that isn't necessarily going to find germination and growth in this incarnation. So this stuff gets a little bit out there. You can take it or leave it. But from what he's shared, often it takes up to 3 favorable incarnations, where one might receive the seed of this message of the soul, and then it's not going to really take hold until a subsequent incarnation. All I can comment on is the fact that when that message of the soul came into my life, there was a deep sense of resonance. So I had my descent, and I kind of reached this place of asking for help, and that's an opening for the help to come. So the spiritual practices cannot actually enter into somebody's life unless there is an openness or a receptivity first from within. And this is really substantiated in the clinical literature, and that things like cognitive behavioral therapy and counseling don't work if you compel someone to go and receive those services. So a court-ordered counseling session doesn't actually translate to positive outcomes for the person who's receiving that support. So, I'm not necessarily lumping in the spiritual practices into and the path of yoga into the same category, but it's not too dissimilar. And so same, you cannot force someone into receiving the benefits from a yoga practice. There has to be a wanting of that emerges from within. So following on from Swamiji's analogy regarding the seed, what I like to share with people is really that seed, just like in nature, there are many seeds that will spend hundreds of years in the ground quite happily, never germinating if the conditions aren't right. And in the Australian bush, it often takes a bushfire for many of the seeds from the eucalyptus and the acacia to open. They won't open in any normal situation. And so these dormant seeds of self-knowledge that we've all got inside of us, though we may be in a progressive descent towards some hard to ignore suffering, when we do open, when we do ask for help, that's the first stage in really opening oneself for more of this growth to begin to happen. And it can be really, really difficult asking for help, but it's 9/10 of the battle. And I really share that when people are looking at joining us on the retreat. I normally point out to them that the fact that they're even looking for something on the retreat means that they're in a way better position than 90% of the other people who aren't yet ready to open themselves to receive. So in terms of finding that germination, like what is it that creates the initial cracking of the outer shell for the life to go forward? Well, the seed has a protective armor, and that life force, when it meets the right conditions, emerges from within. And what I've understood and now experienced is that pure love is that force that gives rise to the germination of the seeds of peace within. It's the highest force that there is. And so life contained inside of a seed will shoot out a root. Okay, where does that root go? The root goes down into the earth, anchoring, stabilizing, ready to absorb nutrients. And then where does the first stem grow? It grows upwards towards the light. Okay, so you can see very quickly that the seed analogy is something that, is innate to life on Earth. I mean, nearly every single human we come across, especially people out in the Grampians, they're like, oh, wow, the trees, the peace. It's like the greenery really resonates with something within. There's not too many people that are like, get me away from nature. I want more air-conditioned boxes in the city. Most people are yearning for that space, and my belief is that because it speaks to in an analogical or in a metaphorical way about what our own journey of growth is like. And so in terms of being an ashram, we find that this process of germination is really what the soul retreat delivers for a lot of people. It's a safe, loving container where Rajni and I are going to shower you in a heap of love and awesome practices where you're going to learn to love yourself. And as many of you have just experienced, it's like, wow, there's this there's an environment and a vibe that has maybe not been experienced in other areas before, or and as a consequence, boom, the root goes down and the shoot goes up towards the light. And on the retreat, there's often that opening and the receiving of that beautiful grace of the sunlight that its nature is to shower universal love energy onto those leaves. Doesn't matter if the leaves come from this seed or that seed, the sun shines on them all equally the same. And so many people will experience a big sense of cracking open in that retreat experience. This practice can do that for people with not the retreat experience. This can happen completely spontaneously. I mean, the great Indian saint Ramana Maharishi, he found the emergence of his enlightenment to to have come from simply lying upon his uncle's basement floor and asking himself, who am I? And that kicked off this massive kind of journey. And he subsequently went on to become a very highly revered saint. But the soul retreat, over the 20 plus incarnations of it that we've done now, seems to be a really, really great environment for people to come out of the shell. We prod and we push to make sure that shell gets a bit cracked. We encourage people to chant in front of other human beings, which terrifies at least 50% of people, if not a bunch more. But the safety of the container allows and the nutrition that's on display here or is available here, most people leave having felt that they've been cracked open. And so great, tick, seed, opens, growth up and down, good to go, right? Wrong. Anyone who's planted any seed in their life will understand that first couple of weeks after planting the seed is really, really vulnerable. So there's this great moment of coming out of the shell, followed by the realization that a bird could come and pick you up like that, a wallaby could kind of nibble you, something could accidentally stand on you, you give it too much water, too little water, too much heat, not enough sunlight, and the game is over for that little seedling as it's trying to make its way. And so what we really help people in that phase of their growth with is supporting the newly formed germination or growth via the online practices. And quick message to all those people who are just off the retreat, I will get the email out to you tomorrow. We've been a little bit inundated this afternoon. We ended up putting a sound meditation on for a member who's back out here. So it's been a little bit busy. But I'll get an email out to you that includes some of our online resources to help keep you at it for the next 7 weeks. And so this is why we've developed the elements of yoga. It's there to help people take those realizations from retreat and then continue to give themselves what is needed to ensure that seed really consolidates. Now, in nature, you need maybe a tree protector, or you might need even like a kind of, be in the seed house, like a complete dedicated structure. Maybe the ashram is more like a seed house. And when you get back home, you're being planted out into your little field and you need what? Like a tree protector. That's a good start. That stops other things coming and standing on you. Well, what is the inner experience of the tree protector? It might be, the masculine side that calls the structure around your practice. Hey, significant other, this is non-negotiable. I'm doing this thing. Can you just leave me alone whilst I'm doing my meditation? It might be setting your alarm at 5:30 so that, you've definitely got time to do the practice. It might even be the inner structure that you need to call upon in order to stay. The other thing, tree protector, also gives warmth. It traps heat, it stops the wind, and so, well, what would be the wind? The wind is that emotional stuff that can come through. So for those that have been on retreat, you're in a nice, safe, contained environment here, and then boom, you get back out to your own home. And there's other characters and people in the world, and the emotions and the wind element starts getting thrown around, and it can be like, whoa, well, that wind is really knocking that seed that I've cultivated around. Interestingly, though, when some scientists first created a biosphere, so a completely contained environment to study the capacity for seeds and other life to grow in other planets. So they created this facility, like a biodome, that didn't have, it wasn't open in any way to the outside world. And they found that in the first iteration, all of the trees died, and they didn't know why. After they studied it, they realized that it was, in fact, the absence of wind that had caused structural weaknesses in all of the trees. And so it turns out that the gentle wind blowing on the trees is the right amount of stress like as long as it doesn't blow the tree over, the right amount of stress stimulates growth in the other direction. So you're getting blown this way, the tree will grow solidly here, and the tree gets blown this way, it will grow solid or structure to resist the pushing of the wind. Well, what's the yogic understanding? Well, our goal is to not be isolated from environments that trigger us or to be isolated from emotion. Our goal is to grow strong in relationship to all of those emotions and triggers of life. And that's what strength is. Okay, so you can't stay in the seed house forever. You are going to need to get out there and let life knock you around a bit in order for you to grow. So you get out, the retreat's been a massive, expansive experience because you've left something behind. There was, for many, a sense of containment in the old self and then a sense of newness in the growth. There can be a bit of a contraction, and that's completely normal as well after a retreat, is to go through something big and then to come back down to earth element, grounding, stability. And that's not a bad thing. After the big, high crown chakra, we're opening, we're going up, it's all growth, whoa, to have to really make sure that you are tethered to the earth. And stability and centeredness is not a impediment or a distraction upon the spiritual path. It's absolutely essential. And look, I've been on many transformative retreats myself, some with the shamanic practices. Obviously, my own experience with doing the soul retreat, it really profoundly moves me every single time. And often after leaving these I'm growing up to the light, the next thing that needs to happen is to really root down and get back into some really humble, earthly pursuits as well. Now, that doesn't mean that you've lost that growth. It just means that you recognize you've got roots as well as growing upwards. So after the first couple of months, when one is sort of more stable and there's a few more branches starting to grow, there's a bit of structure, there's a vegetative kind of phase going on, you're actually in kind of growth mode. You begin to get quite accustomed to your this rapid expansion. What's then really required is a sense of persistence with the practice. What we hear and see a lot of people do, and this is shared from Swamiji as well, is, look, I was struggling, I started meditating, all of my problems went away, so I stopped meditating. And then the problems come back. And the problems are normally our responses to life. We're not talking about external problems being solved, talking about our inner responses to them. And this letting go of something when it's working is very normal. It's very natural. You build the ark before the rain and the flood comes, and you kind of, you take care of your plant before it becomes sick. Like we benefit from tending to ourselves prior to some unforeseen circumstance happening to knock us around further. And so the style of gardening, of self-gardening, begins to change after there's a little bit more growth. For many of the natives that we plant around here, if they make it through the first summer, they're good to go. Even if they get kind of nibbled down by a deer or a wallaby or something, there's normally enough root and structure there to be able to grow back. So understanding what is that critical first phase for you to get through is very important. As we've shared with you all, 7 weeks is a great start for the meditation, because you can't just fluke it. You can kind of fluke 30 minutes a day of meditation for a week. Like, you can not have your space set up well. You can have a bit of a chaotic routine and just kind of jam it in. But if you're really going to persist to a full 7 weeks, you've got to have the systems in place in your life to be very habitual about it. And so by design, that 7 weeks is there to really inspire you all to invest in getting set up. I'm not talking about like financially. I just mean like, reorganizing how your daily flow goes so that you've got the highest chance of success. But once we get beyond that, well, what happens to our, let's follow the nature analogy. What happens to that plant? Maybe there's a little bit of diseased branch here or there, or, it grows in a direction that is crowding up or intermingling with all of the other branches. And so anyone who's cultivated a fruit tree or grown a fruit tree knows that the first couple of years, pruning is really, really important. I kind of freaked out the first time that I planted any fruit trees, and I wasn't really comfortable with pruning. I'm like, I'm kind of scared of cutting this tree because, I always associated removal with bad or death. But when you're cutting a fruit tree, what you're doing is you're increasing the chance for there to be light inside of the tree, as well as directing the energy into those key branches that one day will be carrying the load of the tree. And if those branches are intersecting all over each other, when they get loaded, they'll start rubbing on each other, or they'll grow into each other, or they'll be too crowded and there won't be enough light and air that comes in. So cultivating that tree requires a little bit of skill and knowledge as to which are the branches that you want to grow fruit from. And so that the soul, being that intuitive guide and gardener, helps us start pruning out of our life after some months those things that aren't going to bear fruit. It might be a toxic friendship or something like that has only been clung onto because of old patterning. And it might be an inner realization of, okay, I can snip that off and let that go. Maybe a job. It might be a way of relating to oneself that needs to be snipped and let go. And so, pruning becomes a really important part of your journey. Well, what is that pruning based upon? That's based upon your own knowledge of self, as well as the positing or putting forward of what is the sort of fruit in this tree? Like, what am I trying to grow here? Now, those are going to be the individual values that are being called to be manifest from the individual. So, out here we've got our ashram values, and that's what we run with. But for you, it might be that you begin to feel into each energy center and work out with a little bit more resolution, like, what is it exactly? What is it for me to have my throat chakra clear? What is my unique expression in the world? What is it that I need to be truly satisfied? How do I want to relate to myself? What is it that I like to do for fun? And so you start scoping out a little bit of a better shape to your tree. Once we get past this phase, so self-knowledge rather is what's needed in that phase. Once we get past that phase and we start looking towards, the grandeur of a massive oak tree or a very mature fruit tree, what's required? Well, persistence. The same things that were required at the start, minus perhaps the protection. So, this is where some of the structures can start coming down. You might not need the tree protector after 6 months or something like that. So you can afford to be a little bit more relaxed, because one relaxed day, is not going to turn into a relaxed week. If you've only been going for a week, one relaxed day is definitely going to turn into 2 relaxed days because I'm not meditating anymore. Later down the track, after 10 years of meditation, if you've laid off it for a week, you still know that most likely you're coming back to it. Well, that's been my experience at least. And so at this larger end of the spectrum, what naturally begins to occur is flowering. If the conditions are right and one has tended to this tree well, flowering happens. And those flowers are beautiful. They're fragrant. The bees and birds dine out on them, and in the process of enjoying that beauty, they cross-pollinate with other trees, hopefully compatible types, and then the next phase is fruiting. And fruiting then is the offering of the gifts of that practice out to others. And hidden inside of that fruit, so that might be your knowledge, your mess that has turned now into your message. This might be the accumulation of your journey, comes forward in fruit. And the fruit is delicious and tasty, and in it contains the seed for more growth. Okay, and then the propagation begins to radiate in that beautiful and tasty and nutritious manner. Very much in the spiritual path, the temptation can be to focus on the fruit very, very, very early. And my experience and what we've seen out here at the ashram is a lot of people trying to get focused on the fruit, trying to get propagating and sharing things out there when their tree isn't necessarily in a great place themselves. And we actually had someone who had a lot more gardening knowledge than me come to the ashram, and I'd planted some fruit trees, and they were in their first season of fruiting. And whilst the fruit were really small, he walked around and took all the fruit off. And he's like, mate, you don't even want to worry about the fruit right now. Just send all of the energy back down into the roots, and it'll be better. In year 2, the fruit will be, proper because the energy has gone into the right place. And so this is kind of a sense of tactical patience or showing discipline upon the path to not get so desirous for this big virtuous giving to others, and really investing in oneself and one's own practice until that has been deeply rooted, so that the fruit that then comes is going to be from a healthier all-round tree. So I hope that, this kind of post-retreat phase for a lot of you who are tuned in tonight, and I hope it's a good recap for the different sort of phases of growth that we find ourselves in as humans, that at any stage, it might be that the system needs to have some nutrient added to the soil, or it might need a hard prune every couple of years. Some dead wood has accumulated, needs to be sawed out. This is life upon the spiritual path. It's not a steady state of eternal bliss. Rajni and I are the first to have to look in the mirror each morning and go, okay, wow, that was amazing. What needs to be pruned? Okay, what nutrients are missing in our own hearts or in our own being, and how do we use this self-knowledge that we share with others upon ourselves first and foremost? And it's taken a good deal of years to really see how much of a priority tending to one's own garden actually is. Especially if you're a charitable person and it's in your inner nature to support others, one can very much lean towards the fruit rather than the flowers, rather than giving oneself that nutrient that's required. Hence the emphasis upon the cultivation of sensitivity to your inner guide. And that's the part of you that might see that you're in a little bit of a vulnerable phase and you need to get the protector back up, or it's the part of you that recognizes that a wallaby came in last night and chewed the whole tree over and you've got to go into kind of crisis mode or something like that. So, we pray that you're able to tend to your garden, whatever stage of the journey you're at, whether you're that big oak tree and you're just throwing acorns around everywhere, or whether or not something precious has just found its roots and is growing upwards. We hope that you're able to tend to it as you must. If you'd like to continue hearing more of our unique take on life, the Kailash wisdom, the Himalayan meditation path, check out this playlist that I've put together for you. Jayat Meshwa. Bye.